In 2019, my brother Ryan and I found something out in the Nevada desert that we were never supposed to see, and I still haven't figured out how to stop thinking about it. We were living about an hour outside a small town off Highway 95 at the time, and Ryan had read about an old mining claim from the 50s out in the flats past the highway. He wanted to check it out, take some pictures, maybe get some footage of the equipment before it rusted out completely. We knew the land probably wasn't open to the public. We went anyway early, before the heat got bad. The desert out there is flat and cracked, brush scattered around, rock outcroppings breaking up the land here and there. No cell signal past a certain point. We'd driven that kind of road before, so it didn't worry us. We found the site a little before 8. A collapsed shaft entrance, a couple of leaning sheds, some rail track half swallowed by dirt. Ryan went a look at the sheds. I walked toward a water tank sitting off to the side, the kind ranchers use, expecting it to be bone dry like everything else out there. It wasn't. The metal around the outlet valve was clean, no rust streaks, and when I touched the hose running off it, it was damp. Fresh tire tracks curved away from the base of the tank and disappeared around the rocks. I called Ryan over. He crouched down, looked at the tracks, then at the hose and said, "Lo, that water isn't for the mine." We should have turned around right there. Instead, we followed the hose. It ran through a shallow trench for maybe 200 yards and led us to a low ridge where the ground had been cut into and shored up with wood beams and sheet metal, covered over with dirt and brush. You wouldn't see it from more than 20 feet away. The door was wood, half covered by a tarp, and when Ryan pulled at it, the latch came loose in his hand. The lock had been cut off recently, the metal still bright where it had been cut. Inside it smelled like old sweat and gasoline. It was cramped, maybe 8 feet across, lit by whatever daylight came through the door. Plastic water jugs lined one wall, canned food, a camp stove, a dirty sleeping bag, batteries, some tools, a pile of clothes in the corner. We stood there a minute, not saying much. Then I saw a plastic folder sitting on top of a crate, and I opened it before Ryan could tell me not to. Photographs, maybe 15, 20 of them. A man loading a cooler into his trunk at what looked like a trailhead taken from a distance. A woman walking toward a hiking path, back to the camera. Someone standing near a parked SUV, door open, unaware. I flipped to the next one and stopped. It was a truck parked on a dirt road next to some rocks taken from somewhere up high. It took me a second to place it. Then I did. It was hours from that morning. Ryan heard the gravel before I did. A vehicle coming up the dirt track, engine working against the incline. We both looked at each other and then at the door, and it hit us at the same time. Our truck was sitting right out in the open where we'd left it, visible from up near this ridge. We moved to the edge of the doorway and looked out. A pickup came around the bend and stopped next to ours. A man got out, baseball cap, jeans, nothing that would make you look at him twice anywhere else. He walked to our truck, tried the driver's door, found it unlocked and leaned in to look around the cab. Then he stepped back and stood there a second, looking off toward the mining site, then toward the ridge, then back at the road he'd come in on. We didn't move. I kept one hand flat against the dirt wall, watching loose stone under my boot, worried it would roll and give us away. He looked around a few more times. I couldn't tell if he'd seen anything or if he was just being careful. That not knowing was worse than if he'd looked right at us. He got back in his truck but didn't leave. Just sat there with the engine running. We waited until he finally pulled forward toward the sheds, and the second his truck was between us and him, we came out low and cut behind the ridge the other way, toward a dry wash we remembered passing on the drive-in. We didn't have our water. It was still in the truck. We didn't realize that until we were already a quarter-mile down the wash, and by then going back wasn't an option. The wash bent generally toward the highway, so we followed it, walking fast, mouths dry, checking behind us more than we probably needed to. It took a little over an hour before we hit a fence line that ran along the road. A produce truck slowed down when we waved it over. The driver didn't have a phone signal either, but he let us ride in the cab to the next town, where there was a small sheriff's substation. We told the deputies what we saw. We couldn't give them exact coordinates, just a description of the road and how far out we'd driven, so they didn't get out there until the following morning. The shelter wasn't empty. Some of the water jugs and the sleeping bag were still there. The stove was gone. The plastic folder with the photographs was gone. The sleeping area looked disturbed, like someone had grabbed things in a hurry, and there were fresh tire tracks leading away from the site that didn't match the deputies' vehicles. They never found the man. Our truck turned up 4 months later at a truck stop outside Kingman, Arizona, plates removed, a few of our things missing from inside. No usable prints, nothing that tied it to anyone. I only saw that one photograph of our truck for a few seconds before Ryan and I had to move, so I can't tell you how many other pictures were in that folder or who those people were. I don't know if anything happened to any of them. I've never been able to find out. What stays with me is how close that shelter was to the road. You could drive that stretch of highway 100 times and never know it was there. If your car ever breaks down on a desert highway at night, stay inside and lock the doors. I learned that the hard way when a stranger stopped behind me, and what happened over the next hour is the reason I don't stop for anyone out there anymore. I want to tell you about the night I took a shortcut through the Mojave, and why I will never, ever do it again. It was late September, and I was driving from Barstow to a small town near the Nevada border. I'd made the drive a dozen times before, always on the interstate, always during the day. But that night I was running late for a family thing, and my GPS showed a 2-lane highway cutting straight through the desert that would save me almost an hour. I didn't think twice. I just took it. The sun was already down by the time I turned off the interstate. The road was empty. My headlights were the only light for miles. On both sides, the desert stretched out flat, broken up by clusters of Joshua trees that looked, for just a second every time I passed one, like people standing still. About 40 minutes in, my car started making a sound I hadn't heard before, a kind of grinding, followed by a shudder through the steering wheel. I eased off the gas, and that's when the dashboard lit up red. Engine temperature. I pulled over onto the shoulder, popped the hood, and stood there looking at steam curling up from somewhere I couldn't identify in the dark. I had 1 bar of signal, just enough to call for a tow, and the dispatcher told me it would be at least 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours because I was so far out. I remember laughing a little when she said that, because 2 hours in the middle of nowhere didn't sound so bad. I had a full tank of gas for the heater, a phone at 11%, and snacks in the glove box. I told myself I'd be fine. About 20 minutes after I called the tow company, headlights appeared behind me. Way off in the distance at first, just 2 dots getting bigger. I felt this wave of relief wash over me. Finally, another person, maybe someone who could help, or at least keep me company until the tow arrived. The truck slowed down as it got close, and for a second I thought it was going to pass me. Then it pulled onto the shoulder, right behind my car, engine still running, headlights blasting into my rearview mirror so bright I couldn't see anything but white. A man got out. He was maybe in his 50s, wearing a flannel jacket, and he walked up slow, hands in his pockets. He asked if I needed help, and I told him about the engine, that a tow was already coming. He nodded slowly, looked at my car for a long moment, and then said something that's stuck with me ever since. "You picked a bad night to break down out here." I laughed it off, said something like, "Tell me about it." But he didn't laugh. He just kept looking past me down the highway like he was checking something. Then he said he had some water in his truck if I needed it, and started walking back toward it. That's when I noticed his truck bed wasn't empty. There was a shape under a blue tarp, roped down tight at the corners. Could have been anything: tools, a generator, camping gear. But it was the way he'd angled his truck, blocking the view of it from where I'd first been standing. I told him I was fine, that I didn't need water, and I started backing toward my own car. He stopped walking and turned around, and for just a second his whole expression changed, not angry, just flat, like a mask had slipped. He said, "Suit yourself," but he didn't get back in his truck. He just stood there between me and the road, hands still in his pockets. I got in my car and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so bad I nearly dropped my phone. He was still standing there, lit up by his own headlights, not moving, not leaving. I dialed the tow company back and asked how much longer, trying to keep my voice steady, and the dispatcher said 40 more minutes. 40 minutes. I looked up and he was gone from where he'd been standing. I scanned the mirrors, the windows. Then I heard a knock, not on my window, on the trunk. I didn't move. The knock came again, slower this time, almost lazy. Then I heard him walk around to the driver's side and he tapped twice on the glass, right next to my head, and said, calm as anything, "You dropped something back there when you got out earlier." I hadn't gotten out since I popped the hood. I knew that. He knew that too. I told him through the glass that I was fine, that the tow truck was almost here, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. He just stood there a moment, staring at me through the window with this small, patient smile, and then he said, "All right, take care driving home," and he walked back to his truck. He didn't leave, though. He pulled his truck across the shoulder just ahead of mine, at an angle, and sat there with his engine running and his lights off. For 35 minutes, I sat frozen in my car in the middle of the desert, watching the silhouette of his head in his rearview mirror, watching me. When the tow truck's lights finally came over the horizon, his engine started up almost instantly, like he'd been waiting for exactly that moment. He pulled back onto the highway and drove off into the dark, going the same direction I'd been headed. The tow driver hooked up my car and I told him what happened, and he just shook his head and said, "Yeah, we get calls like that out here sometimes. People go missing on this stretch. Not a lot of cameras, not a lot of witnesses." I never got that man's face clearly enough to describe to police. I never got his plate. All I have is the sound of 2 knocks on my trunk and the memory of a shape under a blue tarp that I chose not to look at closely. Sometimes when I'm driving at night now, even on roads I know well, I still check my mirrors more than I should. And every time I see a truck slow down behind me on an empty road, I think about that stretch of desert highway, and I wonder how many other people have broken down out there, and how many of them made it home. The gas station was the only light I'd seen in 20 minutes of driving through the desert. I was almost out of fuel, so when I saw it, I pulled in without thinking twice. I should have kept driving. I was driving back from my cousin's wedding in Arizona, heading home to California. It was late October, and I'd made the mistake every desert driver warns you about. I left too late in the day, thinking I'd make good time once the sun went down and the heat let up. I didn't account for how empty that stretch of highway really is. No cell service, no streetlights, just 2 lanes of cracked asphalt cutting through miles of dark scrub and rock with mountains. My gas light came on around 9:40 p.m. I still had, according to my dashboard, about 40 miles of range left. I told myself that was fine. There'd be a station somewhere. There's always a station somewhere. There wasn't. I drove for 20 minutes without passing a single building, a single light, a single other car. Just me, my headlights, and the sound of tires on old pavement. My hands started sweating on the wheel. I remember doing that thing you do when you're nervous, talking to yourself out loud, like narrating your own situation makes it less scary. It's fine, you're fine. Something'll show up. And something did. A single light, way off in the distance, low to the ground. I actually laughed out loud from relief. As I got closer, I could make out a small, run-down gas station, one of those old, single-pump places that looks like it hasn't been updated since the 80s. A hand-painted sign, a single flickering light over the pumps, no other cars in the lot. But there was a light on inside the little store attached to it, and that was all I cared about. I pulled in, practically giddy, and got out of my car. The pump was one of those old manual ones, no card reader, so I figured I'd have to pay inside. I walked up to the store. The door had one of those little bells on it. I pushed it open, and the bell rang out way louder than it should have in that silence. Behind the counter was a man, older, maybe 60s. He didn't look up right away. He was writing something in a notebook. When he finally did look at me, he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was the kind of smile you give a stranger when you're trying to remember if you've met them before. "Pump's not card-friendly," he said. "Pay up front, cash, or I run a tab and you pay when you're back through." I told him I wasn't coming back through. I was headed home, opposite direction. He just nodded slowly. I paid him $40 cash, all I had on me, and he told me that get me a decent amount seeing as gas was cheap out there. Made sense. I didn't think twice about it. I went out, started pumping, and that's when I noticed something that's bothered me every day since. There was a second car, parked around the side of the building, mostly hidden by a stack of old tires and a broken vending machine. A sedan, dust-covered back windshield cracked. The engine was making this soft ticking sound, the sound a car makes right after you've turned it off, when the engine's still cooling down, which meant somebody had driven that car recently. Very recently. But there'd been no other cars on the highway. Not one. Not for 20 minutes in either direction. I stood there a second, pump handle in my hand, doing that math in my head that doesn't add up. If nobody drove past me, where did that car come from? And whose was it? I glanced back through the store window. The old man was still at the counter, writing in that notebook again. Alone. I told myself it was an employee's car, or a customer who'd walked off to use a bathroom out back. Simple explanations exist for weird things all the time. That's what I kept telling myself. Then I heard the store door open again, that same bell. I turned, expecting the old man. It wasn't him. It was a woman, mid-30s maybe, barefoot on that hot gravel like she didn't even feel it. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking past me toward the highway. I said, "Hey," just a normal stranger-to-stranger greeting. She didn't answer, didn't even look at me. She just walked, slow and steady, over to that dust-covered sedan, got in and sat there. Didn't start the engine, didn't turn on lights, just sat in the dark car facing the highway. Then my car tank got full. I put the nozzle back, jumped in my car, and pulled out of that lot without looking back, though I did check my mirror once, about a mile down the road. The station's light was still on, tiny in the darkness behind me. The sedan hadn't moved. I drove the rest of the way home with my radio off and my eyes flicking to the rear view more times than I could count. I made it back safe. Nothing chased me. Nothing followed me onto the highway. I've thought about calling someone, the county sheriff, a local paper, anybody, but what would I even say? A woman sat in a parked car and looked at the road. An old man ran a gas station in the middle of nowhere. Nothing illegal happened. Nothing technically wrong. But I looked up that stretch of Route 62 a few weeks later, scrolling through old local news archives out of pure morbid curiosity. 3 people have gone missing along that highway over the last decade, all near that same unmarked mile marker, all still unaccounted for. I don't know what I saw that night. I don't know who that woman was, or why she sat facing a road that never brought anyone to her. But I know I'll never take that route again. That's the end of all 3 desert horror stories. Which story got to you the most? Was it the stranded driver, the hidden shelter, or the gas station in the middle of nowhere? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed these stories, leave a like and subscribe for more horror stories. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Until then, stay safe.